What if the most sacred place on the entire surface of the earth was hiding, buried beneath its own foundations, secrets that change everything you thought you knew about the origins of the Christian faith? What if beneath the feet of millions of pilgrims, tourists and believers who walk every year through St. Peter's Square there existed an entire city of the dead, silent, intact, waiting to be found for 2,000 years? What if the Apostle Peter, the rock upon whom Christ said he would build his church, was exactly where tradition always promised he would be, wrapped in golden cloth, hidden in a small marble niche, just meters from the most important altar in all of Christendom? Today we are going to descend. We are going to go down level by level, layer by layer, century by century, into the depths of a place that has barely 44 hectares of surface but that extends downward with a density of history, of death, of faith and of mystery that no other place on earth can match. Today we are going to explore the underground Vatican. And what you are about to discover here is going to shake something deep inside you. Before we continue, if this kind of deep, somatic and spiritual storytelling moves your soul, I invite you to subscribe to this channel right now and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And tell me in the comments, did you know that beneath the Basilica of St. Peter there is a completely intact 2,000-year-old Roman necropolis? Did you ever imagine that archaeologists had to extinguish their lamps and hide in absolute darkness while SS officers patrolled directly above their heads? And what do you believe? Is it possible that the bones found beneath the main altar are truly the remains of the Apostle Peter? Leave your answer in the comments. Every voice builds this community. Now close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself standing in St. Peter's Square. It is an ordinary morning. The Roman sunlight falls on the red granite obelisk rising at the center of the plaza. Bernini's colonnade embraces you like open arms. Tourists with cameras. Pilgrims with rosaries. Pigeons lifting into the air. Everything seems perfectly ordinary. Perfectly familiar. But what is happening exactly beneath your feet, just a few meters below the stone you are standing on, is anything but ordinary. Because beneath you, in this precise moment, there is a Roman street 2,000 years old. There are wooden doors with bronze knockers. There are frescoes painted with colors so vivid they look as though they dried yesterday. There are names carved in stone. There are urns with ashes. There are marble sarcophagi. There is an entire city that was buried alive, literally covered with earth and sealed beneath the foundations of one of the largest basilicas in the world. And it has been there, in perfect darkness, for 1,600 years. This is not fiction. This is not speculation. This is documented archaeological history. And the story of how it was discovered is, by itself, as dramatic as any thriller you have ever watched in your life. But to understand all of this, we need to go back. Far back. We need to go to Rome in the 1st century of our era, when the place we now call the Vatican was not even part of the city. It was the opposite. It was what lay outside. 2,000 years ago, the region on the other side of the Tiber River, to the west of Rome, was called Ager Vaticanus, the Vatican Field. It was marshy land, with high groundwater, with malaria-carrying mosquitoes. The Romans considered it unhealthy, unsuitable for life, useless for agriculture. But it was perfect for the dead. And Roman law was clear on that point: no one could be buried within the walls of the city. So along all the roads that led out of Rome, families built their necropolises, their cities of the dead. Vatican Hill was one of those cities. But when we say city, we are not using the word metaphorically. It was, literally, a city. 22 mausoleum buildings lined along a cobblestone street, side by side like neighbors who have known each other all their lives. Each one was different. Each one was unique. The wealthiest families of Rome built for their dead actual houses, with rooms decorated with mosaics, with elaborate frescoes, with niches for the urns, with benches for sitting during visits. Because Romans visited their dead. Regularly. With food and with wine. Because they believed the dead would go hungry if no one fed them. Imagine the scene. A dawn in the 1st century. A woman walks along that street of packed earth. She carries in her hands a jar of oil and a loaf of bread. She stops in front of a wooden door with a bronze knocker. She pushes it open. She steps into the dimness of the mausoleum. On the wall, painted with astonishing precision, are the faces of her parents. She commissioned them 10 years ago from a specialized artist. She places the bread in a niche near the urn. She lights a small oil lamp. She whispers their names. Then she steps outside and returns to her daily tasks. For her, it is an ordinary Sunday. She does not know that in 1500 years that place where she set down the bread will have been buried under tons of earth and stone, that the faces of her parents will still be there in perfect darkness, waiting for a visit that will take 16 centuries to arrive. But there is something else on that street. Something that makes this place one of the most charged with sacred history in the entire world. Because it was here, on this very ground of the dead, on this marshy and pagan soil at the margins of the city of Rome, that according to Christian tradition the Apostle Peter died. Simon Peter, the fisherman from Galilee whom Jesus called the Rock. The first of the apostles. The man who denied Christ 3 times and then spent the rest of his life preaching his name until his very last breath. He was crucified by order of the Emperor Nero, approximately in the year 67 of our era. But Peter asked to be crucified upside down, with his head toward the earth and his feet toward the sky. Because he considered it inappropriate to die in the same manner as his Lord. The body was taken down from the cross and buried in the nearest ground, in that same Vatican field. Nearby stood the circus of Nero, with a capacity for 20,000 spectators. The same circus where the emperor organized his massacres of Christians following the Great Fire of Rome in the year 64. Some were thrown to the beasts. Others crucified. Others covered in pitch and set alight as human torches to illuminate the night games. And there, at the center of that circus, stood the obelisk. The same red granite obelisk, 25 meters tall, that today rises at the center of St. Peter's Square. It was brought from Egypt before our era. It stood inside the circus on those nights when the human torches burned. It stood there when Peter was dying on the cross, his head toward the ground. It was later moved to its current position. But it remembers. It is the only eyewitness to those events that still stands on the surface of the earth. Millions of people see it every single day. Not one of them knows what it witnessed. And here the story takes a turn that changes everything. Because when in the 4th century the Emperor Constantine decided to honor the apostle by building a basilica directly over the site of his burial, he encountered a colossal engineering problem. The slope of Vatican Hill was irregular, filled with mausoleums, with stairways, with structures of varying heights. There was not enough flat ground to build a basilica of the size Constantine had in mind. The solution was radical. Demolishing. They cut away the peak of the hill. They filled in the valleys. And the mausoleums, those houses of the dead that Roman families had built with such love and such care, were not destroyed. They were buried. Their roofs were removed, they were packed with compacted earth up to the level of their walls, and they were converted into the very foundation of the new basilica. Literally buried alive. The walls of the dead became the living foundations of the living. And there they remained for 1600 years. In perfect darkness. Absolute silence. With their frescoes intact, their mosaics untouched, their inscriptions unread, their urns in place, their sarcophagi sealed. Waiting. But there was something more that no one yet imagined. The year is 1939. Pope Pius XI dies. Before his death he had expressed his wish to be buried in the Vatican grottos, the underground level of the basilica where popes rest. When workers began excavating to prepare the space for his tomb, something happened. The shovel struck an ancient brick wall. It was not a foundation. It was something more. Behind the wall there was a room. Behind the room, a corridor. Behind the corridor, more rooms. The workers had unknowingly opened the side wall of one of the necropolis mausoleums that Constantine had sealed in the 4th century. The new pope, Pius XII, made his decision within hours. Excavate. In total secrecy. Without telling the press. Without informing the public. Without communicating anything to other Vatican governments. If they found the tomb of the apostle, it would be the greatest archaeological triumph in Christian history. If they found something that contradicted the traditions, it would be an unprecedented catastrophe. The Pope was taking a monumental risk. And he knew it. The excavations lasted 10 years. From 1940 to 1950. 10 years of silent, clandestine, suffocating work. In narrow corridors barely illuminated by kerosene lamps. In thick and humid air where every step could mean a fall into darkness. The archaeologists and workers removed the earth in buckets during the night so that no one would see. And outside, the world was burning in war. But what came next no one expected. In 1943, the German armies occupied Rome. Several SS officers arrived at the gates of the Vatican with questions about the noises and earth movements being perceived from outside. Pius XII received them personally. He led them through the corridors of the grottos. He showed them medieval papal sarcophagi, marble walls, ancient columns. It was a restoration, he said calmly. Nothing of importance. You may leave. And the officers left. Meanwhile, 2 levels below, in absolute darkness, the workers had extinguished their lamps and were holding their breath. There, in complete silence, pressed between the earth and the weight of history, they waited for hours until the footsteps above their heads faded away. Then they lit their lamps again. And they went back to work. This happened for months. Stop for a moment and think about that. Think about what that act meant. Those men, in the darkness, protecting with their silent bodies the oldest secret of Christianity, while the horror of the war passed literally over their heads. What do you think of that level of determination? What do you think of that kind of silent faith, not the kind that is shouted in the squares, but the kind that holds still in the darkness? Tell me in the comments what that means to you. What those men found in those 10 years surpassed every hope. 22 mausoleums along an ancient street, each one unique, each one different, each one like an open window onto the first century of our era. In one, frescoes with garlands of green leaves and colorful birds, symbols of life after death in the Roman tradition. In another, a mosaic floor with dolphins and tritons and scenes of the sea. In a third, an image of Mercury, the messenger god, the guide of souls toward the kingdom of the dead. And the paintings. The paintings were something that none of those archaeologists were prepared to see. For 1500 years, in perfect darkness and dry air, the colors had been preserved with astonishing fidelity. When the archaeologists broke the first opening in the wall of a mausoleum and directed the light of their lamp inside, they saw a face. A face painted 2,000 years ago. Bright. Fresh. As though the painter had finished his work the day before. A woman with the elegant hairstyle of the Roman matron. A man with the inscription Gaius Valerius Hermes, a lawyer who lived 62 years. A child with a ball in his hands. These people had been staring into darkness for 15 centuries without seeing a single living human being. And suddenly, in the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, they had visitors again. The archaeologists called those moments a visit. A reunion. And the word is perfect. But among all the discoveries of those 10 years, there was one that stopped time. In one of the mausoleums, beside an adult sarcophagus, there was a smaller one. A child sarcophagus. Inside, the remains of a girl between 10 and 12 years of age. And beside her, a small ivory doll. With articulated arms and legs. With hinges that after 2,000 years still worked. When the archaeologist took the doll in his hands, the arms moved. The testimonies of those who were present at that moment say it was the most emotional instant of all 10 years of excavation. Not because it was the most valuable find. Not because it held the greatest historical importance. But because in that movement of a doll's arms, in that mechanical and silent gesture, 2 worlds crossed that time had separated. A girl who died 2,000 years ago, whose name no one remembers, had placed beside her what she loved most. And that love survived intact, in the darkness, for 2 millennia. The doll remembers. Even though we have forgotten. And in that same level, in that same buried necropolis, the archaeologists found something that would make art historians reflect for generations. In one of the mausoleums, on the ceiling, an image that no one expected to find in that place and in that context. Christ. But not the Christ we know. Not the long-haired man in a white robe who dominated medieval and Renaissance Christian art. No. This was a radiant young man, with golden rays of light around his head, driving a chariot of fire across the sky. Exactly like Apollo. Exactly like Helios, the sun god of the Greco-Roman tradition. The dating places it in the 3rd and 4th centuries of our era. It is one of the oldest known images of Christ in world art. And what it reveals is fascinating from a theological and historical point of view. The first Christians did not arrive at their faith in a cultural vacuum. They came from the pagan world, from a civilization deeply saturated with religious images and symbols. And at the beginning, with complete naturalness, they translated their new faith into the visual language they already knew. Christ as the Sun of Righteousness. Christ as the light that illuminates the world. Christ bearing the image of the God who every day conquers darkness and brings the morning. But this created a problem. Christ with sun rays looked too much like Apollo. He looked too much like Mithras, the Persian sun god whose cult was enormously popular among Roman soldiers in those centuries. The new faith needed its own images, distinctive, unmistakable. And so, at some point in the 4th century, that radiant young man in his chariot of fire was abandoned. The long-haired man with the circular halo, the image we recognize today immediately as Christ, was the one that won. And the young Helios was left buried in the darkness beneath the altar. He waited 16 centuries to be found. And the Vatican keeps him carefully, without drawing too much attention to him. And in that same necropolis, less than 1 meter away from mausoleums with images of Mercury, Apollo and Dionysus, the archaeologists found the mausoleum of the Julie family, one of the few clearly Christian mausoleums in the entire necropolis. On the floor, a mosaic with the Good Shepherd scene. On the walls, images from the early Christian tradition. But on the other side of that wall, less than 1 meter away, there were pagan families who also came to leave food for their dead, who also lit small oil lamps, who also whispered names in the dimness. Separated by less than 1 meter of stone. United by the same gesture of love toward those they had lost. That was the real world in which Christianity was born. Not a monolith. Not a fortress of absolute certainties. But a complex and human fabric of beliefs that coexisted, that brushed against each other, that sometimes fused and sometimes ignored each other, but that shared the same darkness and the same bread left on a cold stone. But the main objective of the entire excavation was something else. And as the archaeologists moved along the streets of the necropolis, they noticed something. All the mausoleums were oriented toward a single point. An exact point beneath the main altar of the basilica. As if that entire city of the dead had been built around something. As if everything gravitated toward an invisible center. At that exact point, where there was no mausoleum, they found a different structure. More modest. A red brick wall with 2 superimposed niches, separated by a marble slab. Ecclesiastical writers of the 2nd century had mentioned this monument with a specific name, the Trophy of Gaius. And they said of it, plainly, that it was situated above the tomb of the apostle. That beneath it lay the remains of Peter. Beneath the structure, there was indeed a pit in the earth. A burial pit. It was empty. 10 years of work. The longest wait in the history of Christian archaeology. And the pit was empty. Pope Pius XII received the report and, according to the testimonies of those who were close to him in those days, did not leave his rooms for several days in a row. But here the story, far from ending, takes the most dramatic turn of the entire account. Because in the left wall of the Trophy of Gaius, there was a small niche that for years no one had examined with sufficient attention. It was sealed by a small marble slab. When it was finally opened, inside there were bones. Bones wrapped in a fabric woven with gold thread. The bones corresponded to an elderly man. He was between 60 and 70 years of age. He was of strong constitution. Beside the bones there were particles of earth that, analyzed chemically, matched exactly the composition of the earth from the empty pit below the trophy. The archaeologist Margherita Garducci, who worked for years studying the inscriptions in that place, proposed a hypothesis: the bones had originally been in the earth, in that burial pit. And at some point in the 2nd or 3rd century, someone, perhaps aware of the danger that Roman persecution represented, had quietly removed them from the earth, had wrapped them in the most precious fabric available, and had placed them in that side niche. Had saved them. Had protected them. And had then sealed them with silence. And on the wall, near that niche, carved in stone among other inscriptions, were 2 words in Greek. Garducci read them as Petros Eni. Peter is here. This discovery was made in 1952. The official Vatican reaction took 16 years to arrive. In 1968, Pope Paul VI stood before journalists and announced that the remains of the Apostle Peter had been identified. The room fell silent. The journalists asked him to repeat it. The Pope repeated it. There is no direct evidence. There are no inscriptions on the bones. There is no possibility of DNA comparison. There are the bones of an elderly man, of robust build, found exactly where tradition had always said they would be, wrapped in golden cloth, in the niche closest to the point toward which all the roads of that necropolis converged. Is it proof or coincidence? The answer depends on who is answering. For believers, it is the tomb of the founder of the Church. For skeptics, it is a fascinating but unverifiable hypothesis. The truth sleeps in that niche, alongside the one who could confirm it. And that is not a metaphor either. But the Vatican has still more levels. Because between the necropolis and the light of day, between the Roman mausoleums and the 16th century basilica, there is another space that connects both worlds. The Vatican grottos. A series of chapels and funerary chambers where dozens of popes rest, from the medieval to the contemporary. John Paul II was placed here in 2005, before his remains were moved into the basilica after his beatification. The grottos are open to visitors. But compared to what lies below, they seem almost modern. Because Rome has even deeper depths. And when speaking of the early Christian world, it is impossible not to descend also toward the catacombs. More than 150 kilometers of tunnels carved into the soft volcanic tufa beneath the city. 5 underground floors, down to 25 meters in depth. Niches from floor to ceiling, row after row, like the shelves of an immense library. Only instead of books, there are the dead. It is estimated that between 500,000 and several million people were buried there over the course of several centuries. That is not exaggeration. It is the mathematics of space. Visiting the catacombs is an experience difficult to describe in words. The corridors are narrow, so narrow that 2 people can barely pass at the same time. The walls are red tufa. Most of the niches are empty today, the bones removed or disintegrated over time. But some are still sealed with their original stone slabs. And on those slabs there are names. Helena, in peace. Felix, servant of God, departed on the 4th day before the calends of March. Dates. Symbols. And among the symbols, curiously, almost never a cross. Because the first Christians did not use the cross as an emblem. The cross was the most infamous instrument of Roman justice, associated with the worst form of execution. What they did use, consistently and repeatedly, was the fish. The fish in Greek is ichthys, and for those believers it was an acronym that served as a complete declaration of faith, Isis Christos Theos Soter. Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. And on the walls of the catacombs, among the niches and the slabs, there is something still more intimate. There are graffiti. Inscriptions traced with the point of a hard object in the soft stone by visitors who passed through there hundreds of years ago. Peter and Paul, weep for Victor. Mother, forgive me. Tell the Lord that Felix loved you. These are voices. Real voices of real people who stopped in the darkness, with a small oil lamp in hand, before the sealed niche of someone they loved, and wrote in the stone what they felt because they needed to leave it somewhere that would last forever. No one answered them. But we read their words 1500 years later. Is there not something profoundly sacred in that? Is there not something that touches you in the deepest place when you think that those words survived wars, empires, centuries of darkness and total silence, and reached us? What would you write in the stone if you knew that someone would read it 1,000 years from now? Let me know in the comments. But there is something more in the catacombs that goes beyond the dead. Because the catacombs were not only cemeteries. During the periods of persecution, when being a Christian in Rome meant risking death, the catacombs were also the place where the community gathered in secret. Liturgies were celebrated in the wider chambers. Children were baptized. Bishops were ordained. Sacred texts were read aloud in low voices while Roman soldiers patrolled the streets directly above their heads. It was a perfectly organized and perfectly invisible community. It had its access routes, its recognition signals, its rules for entering and leaving. People outside were servants, artisans, market vendors, were transformed within those corridors into the vanguard of a spiritual revolution that was about to change the history of the entire world. And they did it in whispers, in the darkness, among the dead, with the smell of damp earth and candle wax filtering through the bones. When Constantine legalized Christianity in the 4th century, the catacombs became places of mass pilgrimage. The faithful came from all of Rome, from all of Italy, from all of the empire, to visit the tombs of the martyrs. And in the walls, in some places, small openings were carved, where pilgrims left food as an offering during feast days of the martyrs. The same traditions that pagan Romans brought to their necropolises. The same gesture. The same bread. The same oil. Only the names of those who received the offering changed. People do not change. Only the names change of those to whom they bring bread in the darkness. And yet, with everything we have discovered so far, there is one more level of the Vatican that none of the previous ones can match in historical depth. And it is not underground. It is on the shelves. 85 kilometers of shelving. That is the extent of the Vatican Apostolic Archive. The same distance that lies between Rome and Naples, but traveled not along a road but by documents stacked from floor to ceiling, century after century, from the year 700 of our era to the present day. Correspondence with kings, emperors and 20th century dictators. The complete protocols of the Inquisition. Personal letters from the condemned, desperate appeals, final sentences. The complete file of the trial against Galileo Galilei, the man whom the Church forced to recant scientific truth because he affirmed that the earth revolved around the sun. The letter from King Henry VIII of England requesting the annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, a request that was refused and that triggered the severing of all England from Rome and the birth of the Anglican Church. A letter from Marie Antoinette from her prison cell, written days before her execution on the guillotine. The papal bull of 1520 threatening Martin Luther with excommunication, the document that in the following months would split Western Christianity into two halves that never fully rejoined. And a letter from Michelangelo complaining that he had not been paid for his work in the Sistine Chapel and that he had to borrow money from his neighbors to buy the materials to paint the ceiling. History is written by people we know from textbooks as giants, as symbols, as forces of history. But their letters reveal that they were people. That they had financial worries and personal fears and everyday frustrations. And all those letters, all those documents, are kept in a place to which almost no one has access, on shelves stretching 85 kilometers, beneath an institution 2,000 years old. But among all the documents in the archive, there is one that was found only in the year 2001 and that irreversibly changed the understanding of one of the most tragic and fascinating episodes in medieval history. Among millions of pages, the Chinon parchment appeared. A 14th century document that records a secret papal investigation. And what that parchment reveals is this: Pope Clement V privately absolved the Knights Templar of the charges of heresy that the King of France, Philip IV, had brought against them. He recognized them as innocent. But then he yielded to the political pressure of the monarch and gave his approval for the destruction of the order. The knights were tortured. Many confessed under torment to crimes they had not committed. They were condemned, stripped of everything, executed. In March of 1314, in Paris, the last Grand Master of the Order of the Temple, Jacques de Molay, was burned alive on an island in the river Seine. He was in the flames when he died. And he died knowing, or feeling in the deepest part of himself, that he had been condemned unjustly. According to legend, in the midst of the fire, de Molay pronounced a curse upon the Pope and upon the King. Clement V died 1 month later. Philip IV died 8 months after that. Whether that is coincidence or something more, each person decides for themselves. But what is not coincidence is that the document recognizing his innocence was kept a few kilometers from the place of his execution, inside the Vatican archive, for 700 years, waiting for someone to find it. 700 years during which the official history of the Templars was the history of heretics and degenerates. 700 years in which the name of de Molay was synonymous with guilt. And the truth was there, behind a closed door, on some anonymous shelf among 85 kilometers of silence. Imagine you are a researcher who has obtained access to the archive. You are accompanied down a long corridor. They give you white gloves. They bring you the single document you have requested, just one. You cannot ask for more. You cannot photograph freely. Beside you there is an archive worker who observes you without intervening. On the tables around you there are millions of pages you will never be allowed to read. Letters from Cesare Borgia. Reports from the inquisitors of Nazi Germany. Negotiation protocols with Mussolini. All of that is meters away from you. And you will only see what you have been authorized to see. The rest will wait. 100 years more. Or forever. Because some sections of the archive are completely closed, particularly the documents of the last 75 years, of which nothing is known by anyone except the Pope and a very small circle of trusted individuals. In 2019, the Vatican officially renamed the secret Vatican archive as the Vatican Apostolic Archive. The change was presented as a gesture of openness, as an attempt to dismantle conspiracy theories. But the mystery did not disappear with the change of name. Because the mystery was never in the words. It was in the facts. 85 kilometers of shelving is only what is known. No one knows how many more drawers are closed. No one knows what is in the documents of the last 75 years. No one says. 6 levels. 6 mysteries. The obelisk in the square that witnessed the executions under Nero. The necropolis with 22 intact mausoleums beneath the main altar. The ivory doll with articulated arms beside the bones of a young girl. The fresco where Christ drives a chariot of fire like Helios. The empty pit and the bones in golden cloth beside the marble niche. The 700-year-old parchment that kept in silence the innocence of those who burned for a lie. Vatican. The smallest country in the world. 44 hectares. But it goes deeper than any other place on earth. And the deeper you go, the more questions accumulate without answers. What mausoleums still wait, untouched, in that subsoil? What is kept on the shelves of the last 75 years? Why does a country founded on the idea of revealed truth guard so jealously what lies beneath its feet? Perhaps because some answers are harder to bear than the questions. Perhaps because true faith, genuine faith, is not the absence of questions but the capacity to live with them without being destroyed by them. Perhaps because the darkness itself, that darkness which protected for centuries the frescoes of the necropolis, the bones in golden cloth, the words carved into the walls of the catacombs, serves a function we do not always understand. Darkness preserves. Darkness protects. Darkness keeps what the light of the world would not know how to care for. The girl in the sarcophagus whose name no one remembers had a doll with articulated arms. And those arms moved after 2,000 years. The love that her mother placed beside her survived empires, earthquakes, wars and centuries of complete oblivion. That is what this place tells us, if we know how to listen. That what is truly important survives. That what truly matters finds its way through, even if it takes 2,000 years. That stone can speak. That bones can hold an identity. That an ivory doll can remember the name of a girl that time carried away. And you, who are reading or listening to this right now, have something that girl did not have, the time that still remains. The possibility of leaving something in the stone that someone will read. The possibility that what you do today, with faith, with love, with silence or with courage, will outlast your name and reach further than you can imagine. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it made you think, if it moved something in you, leave your like right now. That small gesture helps these stories reach more people who need them. Subscribe to this channel if you have not done so yet, because every week we bring stories of this depth, stories you will not find anywhere else. And if you know someone, a friend, a family member, someone who loves history and faith, share this video with that person right now. Because these stories should not stay in just one heart. And before you go, I need to tell you something. This is not the only story of this kind that exists. There is another mystery in the story of the first apostle, a mystery that happened long before Rome, long before the crucifixion, on the shores of a lake in Galilee, in the moment when a fisher let go of his nets and took the step that changed his life forever. That story also has layers that most people have never explored. And we will tell it very soon. Do not miss it.